There's an energy out there that we have not seen before. And I am convinced that in 9 days, we are going to grow the House majority, we're going to take back the Senate, and send Donald Trump back to the White House. Let me tell you why that is. Because everywhere around the country, no matter where you live, everybody is fed up and they are fired up. They're fed up. It doesn't matter what demographic they're in. It doesn't matter what walk of life. They know that we cannot afford 4 more years of Kamala Harris in the White House.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking at Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally last night. Joining us now, MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck. Brendan was communications strategist and former aide to House Speakers Ryan and Boehner. Brendan, let's just start off by getting your take last night on that spectacle we saw at Madison Square Garden, where speaker after speaker flat out racist, insulting, offensive comments about the vice president herself, about a number of groups, including Puerto Ricans. How is that a helpful closing argument for the Trump campaign?
Yeah, I mean, they clearly couldn't help themselves. This is the last moment when you're trying to clarify the race. And obviously, this is a huge distraction. And I guess the Trump campaign trying to do what it feels like it should to clean it up, I guess, half-heartedly a bit. I'm skeptical that this is going to change a whole lot. It seems to just play into what we already know about Trump and a lot of the folks who hang around him. It just, to me, reinforces the lack of discipline and seriousness within this campaign and, frankly, the party today. This type of thing used to be a spectacle, as you said, that would be a showstopper, and everybody would be talking about how the candidate needed to disavow and we needed to, talk about what they're going to do next. This seems to wash over us, and I think it reinforces who Donald Trump has been and the type of people that he wants to, associate with. Yeah, it certainly angered a lot of people last night. So Brendan, let's talk about the state of the race. We've been talked a lot about last week about the vibes, and there's certainly Republicans certainly trying to suggest that they have the momentum. We just heard from Speaker Johnson. There seem to be little people reading tea leaves. Idea that a couple of major newspapers, including the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, refused to make endorsements. People read that as well, they don't want to alienate Trump. They think Trump's going to win. But we saw an ABC News poll yesterday that actually was very encouraging for the vice president. Give us your take on just where things stand right now. Yeah, I mean, it's been hard for the last couple of weeks not to feel like their momentum was sliding towards Donald Trump. Polls getting much closer than they had been, perhaps weeks ago. On the flip side, we may be seeing a situation where the Electoral College advantage for Republicans isn't quite as large as we perhaps thought. In some of these, there hasn't been as big of a difference in the swing state polls as there has been in the national ones. Reality is, we just don't know whether the polls are getting any of this right at this point. And what we do know is this is about a toss-up race. And that's why this last week is so critical. We know that Kamala Harris is having a big event tomorrow to try to raise the stakes of the election. And you would think that that's what Donald Trump should be doing right now. He's making, as we've talked about before, a big bet on some low-propensity voters who you're not really sure if they're going to turn out. And the election could come down to whether he can motivate people who like him a lot but aren't necessarily usually the ones who participate in elections to come out. And so, I think we're finally at the point where it's okay to actually say it's going to come down to turnout, but it really may be the situation because there's very little you can glean from these polling and even from early voting to say anybody has a clear advantage. Yeah, Trump, this will be the third cycle in a row where he's trying to turn out voters who have never voted before, low propensity voters. That's so hard to do. This time around, young men of color included. Of course, for Harris, it's about women. It's about abortion rights being the big motivator there. So, Brendan, let's talk a little bit more about the polls do suggest, the national polls, that Trump's made some gains. But they seem to be in states that don't matter as much to the Electoral College, New York or California. He's not going to win those. But it may impact the House. What's your take right now on where the two chambers of Congress stand 8 days before the election? Yeah, also feels a bit like a toss-up, but you're right. There are, of course, swing seats, all across the country. We've got a couple in Iowa, but there are, I think, 9 toss-up seats in California and New York, not typical battlegrounds. And those could decide the election, and we don't have a whole lot of polling in areas like that. And so what we're going to see is there enough momentum, or enthusiasm in places like that to impact turnout? Mike Johnson there obviously going to say what he needs to say about being confident. His job, I think, depends on holding the House. I mean, if Republicans lose the House, he's probably out of a job, even as leader of the party. Look, there is a very good chance, though, at this point that Republicans will have a clean sweep of government. The Senate is almost surely going to go Republican, and I'm actually not sure why the Harris campaign hasn't leaned into a little bit more the threat that they could present. That not only could you be electing Donald Trump, but you could be electing unified Republican government to do whatever he wants to do. I think that we often see in polling that when you talk about a message of checks and balances, that works really well. And on the flip side, presenting Donald Trump not only as being put back in power, but potentially having a Congress that will be unified and do his bidding, I think could be a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah, we'll have to see if the Harris campaign leans on that message the next couple of days. We do, as you say, expect her to deliver a form of a closing argument tomorrow at the Ellipse there in Washington, the exact same site where Trump spoke on January 6th.